Welcome to the KWWL studios and a special Saturday night edition of Decision 2014, the 1st District Congressional Debate. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ron Steele, and tonight we are so happy to bring you a debate between the candidates in Iowa's 1st Congressional Districts. Both of these candidates hail from the great city of Dubuque. Rod Blum is the Republican candidate. He is a Dubuque businessman, owner of Digital Canal Corporation, a real estate developer. He is 59 years old. Pat Murphy is the Democratic candidate. He has served in the Iowa legislature for the past 25 years as House Minority Leader and also Speaker of the House, but he'll be leaving his seat in the Iowa House to run for Congress. He is 55. Gentlemen, welcome to KWWL Television tonight, also online. We appreciate you taking the time here on a Saturday night, and we look forward to all of your comments here during this 60-minute forum. Well, tonight's debate is being broadcast live right here on KWWL main channel, along with live streaming right now on KWWL.com. Also on Twitter, we have live tweeting going on right now at KWWL. You can join in, of course, by using the hashtag tonight, IAVotes14, IAVotes14. And as always, we welcome your comments, good and bad, on our KWWL Facebook page. Joining me on tonight's panel is my news colleague here at KWWL, Amanda Goodman, anchor and reporter for KWWL Television and KWWL.com. We also welcome to the panel tonight Christinia Krippus. Christinia is a reporter for the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, and rounding out our panel tonight, Alicia Yeager, a reporter for our coverage partners at the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald. Amanda.
While both of our candidates are well known in Dubuque, the 1st Congressional District extends far beyond Dubuque to include the majority of northeastern Iowa. Now, KWWL covers the entire 1st District. The 1st District includes the cities of Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, and Dubuque. Overall, 20 eastern Iowa counties and more than 500,000 people.
All right, here's how tonight's debate format will be playing out during the next hour. Each candidate will have a minute and a half, 90 seconds, to present an opening statement. Then we'll move into our question and answer session with our panel. Candidates then will have 1 minute as a first response, followed by 30 seconds of rebuttal time if they want for each candidate. As moderator, I will have the option to ask a follow-up question if necessary, and the candidates then would have 30 seconds to make a response.
We will also ask the candidates questions you submitted online and through our social media pages. During this hour, we will also give the candidates a chance to ask their opponent a question. And near the end of the hour, the candidates will have 2 minutes each for closing statements. About a half an hour ago, we conducted a coin toss to determine which candidate will make an opening statement first. Ron tossed the coin, and here is the result. Mr. Murphy won the toss. Mr. Murphy has elected to go first in his opening statement.
All right, Mr. Murphy, you have 90 seconds. We welcome you here tonight.
Well, first of all, thank you for KWWL putting on this tonight. And also, along with that, I want to thank the viewers who are turning in tonight. I'm Pat Murphy. I'm a state representative from Dubuque. I've been working as a state representative representing the middle class for the last 25 years. And quite frankly, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I would appreciate getting your vote if I could on Tuesday, November 4th. But more importantly, my wife Terry and I have had the opportunity to raise our family in Dubuque and live in Northeast Iowa for the last 33 years that we've been married, and I'm very proud of that. And we've been very fortunate that our children have been able to also raise their families here. We now have 9 grandchildren. I want to make sure that we continue to have those educational opportunities. That's why, as Speaker of the House, I moved to raise the minimum wage to $7.25 an hour and did it 2 years before the federal government did. But along with that, we also passed the Lilly Ledbetter Act to help make women get equal pay for equal work. Along with that, though, too, we worked on education, making sure that STEM was available for science, technology, engineering, and math. And if I go to Congress, I'll continue to work to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, continue to address inequities at work, but more importantly, I'm going to work to protect Social Security and Medicare. Now, my opponent's going to say he doesn't have a record, but he has written columns, and he has talked about making Social Security a program that would be put on Wall Street. Along with that, also raising the retirement age, and along with that, putting Medicare as a voucher program.
Ms. Murphy, thank you very much. You've just made it within the time allotted. Mr. Blum, let's have your opening statement.
I'd also like to thank KWWL Television for this opportunity, and I also would like to extend, Karen, my wife, and I would like to extend our condolences to the Doug Buttier family in Dubuque, who tragically died in a plane crash this week. I just want the family to know that they'll be in our thoughts and prayers. Born and raised in Dubuque, Iowa. My parents both had 10th grade educations. We didn't have a lot growing up. 2 rooms in the house I was born in had dirt floors. The oil burner was in the middle of the kitchen, and we raised chickens in the attic. My parents, as I said, didn't have much as far as materially or education, but they always taught me the value of hard work, the value of thrift, and the value of getting a good education. I graduated from Loras College in Dubuque and also graduated with an MBA from the University of Dubuque and set out to work on my version of the American dream. I ended up in the software industry, and I ended up co-owning a software company that when I arrived there, the payroll was about $120,000 a year. And after 5 years, that payroll had grown 100-fold to $12 million a year. In fact, our average employee when I left makes the equivalent of today of $60,000. The reasons I'm running is I love this country, I love Americans, I believe in American exceptionalism, but I believe our country is heading on the wrong track. I am not running to have cocktails with John Boehner. I'm certainly not running to be a career politician. I don't want to go to Washington, D.C. to be important. I want to go to Washington, D.C. to do something that's important, and that is get this country back on track and create a society of opportunity once again.
Mr. Blum, thank you very much. Our opening statement's complete now. Let's begin our questioning here. Amanda, you get things started right now.
All right, Ron, thank you so much. Mr. Murphy, you've said in a previous debate the less government would actually be a detriment when it comes to public health. Well, how would more government involvement help with the panic and the crisis with Ebola right now?
Well, I think that's the point, because if you take a look at what's occurred with sequestration, and this is the concern, we've actually have had a 10% reduction in the Centers for Disease Control on their actual funding. It's important to make sure that they have the tools that they need so they can educate our healthcare workers that are on the front line. My wife's a nurse. She was a 20-year emergency room nurse, and it's important to make sure that they have both the vaccines, which they don't have one for this now, but to also make sure that they have the tools that they need throughout the country to, one, combat this, two, prevent our workers from getting sick, and thirdly, along with that, we also need to make sure that we work for containment of this so it doesn't spread. So I think the most important part that we need to do is, this is an example of where making sure we well-fund government does take care of a public health crisis so it doesn't spread. And so that's why I support us probably going back to the level of funding that they had prior to the sequestration.
All right, Mr. Blum, your response.
Spoken like a true politician, career politician. We never have enough money in government. In fact, in the budget that the GOP submitted last year, they put more money, Pat, into that budget than President Obama requested for the CDC. When I think of the Ebola outbreak and the crisis that we potentially have in our hands, one word comes to mind, and that is incompetence. It shows the incompetence of the federal government. It shows that we've grown so big that they can't control themselves, in fact. And the political appointment that you just made.
Mr. Blum, that's your time on that, but I want to continue this on.
That's what the red light means.
I want to continue this on here by asking both of you real quickly. Ron Klain, the president's choice for a czar, no background in infectious diseases or even in public health. How do you feel about that choice?
I think it's a horrible choice. I would think we'd want a physician or at least someone that's managed something before in their life. But this administration, it's very typical of the administration to appoint their political buddies or political hacks to very important positions. Hence, that's why we have government incompetence today.
Mr. Murphy?
I don't know why the president made that appointment. You would have to ask him that yourself. But here's the part I would think is you would want somebody that has a lot of experience in epidemiology, making sure that they know and understand, one, the crisis. A lot of people are calling for a number of different things, but I think the most important thing is to have somebody that has an understanding, has educational background, and has the healthcare experience to make sure that they make the right decisions and to ask for the right appropriate levels of funding.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Christina Krippitz of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, the next question for Mr. Blum, and we'd like to start with that right now.
Thank you. Mr. Blum, the Affordable Care Act will not be repealed during President Obama's tenure. So what should Congress, or what can or should Congress do during the next 2 years to better implement that law or make improvements to it along the way?
I think the Affordable Care Act is a horrible piece of legislation. I also agree with you that it can't be repealed as long as President Obama is President of the United States. So we're going to have to try to work with it and do the best we can over the next 2 years. It's a 2,700-page long law. They were bound to get a few things right. For example, pre-existing conditions, letting children stay on their parents' policies till they're 26 years old, and removing the payment cap of insurance companies. But what we need to do is get free market principles, get the miracle of the free market working again in healthcare. So every American's entitled to an HSA, for example. We need to force big insurance companies to compete and things like that. But so we're going to have to work within that law for 2 years. Hopefully in 2017, it can be repealed and replaced.
Ms. Murphy, your response.
Well, thank you. I think first of all is what we need to do is make sure that we focus on what we can do to improve it. There's 8.1 million Americans that have access to health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, through the exchange. We need to see what we can do for states that didn't opt in to help create incentives for them. But along with that, we also need to look at the fact that some people are being taxed on their health plans. We should probably not tax anybody on their health plan. And so that's one of the areas I think we should address. And along with that, see what we can do to get all insurance companies to get into the exchange.
All right, Ms. Murphy, thank you very much. And Christina, didn't I tell you I'd have trouble with that name? All right. Alicia Yeager of the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald has the next question for, let's see, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Both of you are well known in the Dubuque community, but the 1st Congressional District reaches far beyond that city. What issues are most important to the rest of eastern Iowa?
Well, I assume that question then is for me?
That is for Mr. Murphy,
Okay.
yes.
Well, I think probably the most important issues that I'm hearing throughout the district is focusing on the economy, science, technology, engineering, and math, making sure that the education that we're providing for students today meet the advanced manufacturing jobs of what are available today and for the future. So we need to continue to work with high schools and community colleges to create those opportunities. My opponents actually talked about eliminating the Department of Education, which would eliminate Pell Grants, so we need to make sure we keep that. But along with that, we need to keep a focus on some other things too. Raising the minimum wage. People that are making the minimum wage have been making that for 7 years. We need to address that. Women only earn 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes. We need to make sure that we address that issue too by doing the Paycheck Fairness Act, because if they're doing comparable work, they should get comparable pay. And that's not a middle class issue. It's an issue for all of the middle class, not just a women's issue. And last, we need to make sure that we protect Social Security and Medicare so that those programs stay at the funding levels and that the benefits are the same. It's an earned benefit. They should receive it.
Mr. Blum.
There you go again, Pat, spoken like a career politician. The answer to every question is more government, more taxes.
Election
more
day is Tuesday,
taxpayers.
November 4th, and we have an
Number one
important
issue
choice
as
to
I've
make.
traveled the district over the last 20 months and spoken to Eastern Iowans is jobs and the economy. The fact of the matter is this is the worst economic recovery in United States history post-World War II. The average middle class, the average working family's income since Barack Obama took the oath of office is down. The average working family's household net worth in the last 10 years is down.
I got to cut you off. Sorry about that.
No,
Let me continue on here. Let's go with what Pat said earlier about minimum wage. Let me ask you tonight, first of all, both of you, what promises are you willing to make to women here tonight on the equal pay issue, and how could you, or would you please give us a specific example of something you have done or that you will do to help close that gap for women on the wage issue? Mr. Blum, you continue on here.
I absolutely agree that women should make the same amount of man if they have equal experience and they're doing the same job. And I believe that right is protected by the law. The 1963 Equal Pay Act has already been passed. It's already a law on our books. An example would be at our company, we don't look at gender, obviously, when we hire a person. We're looking to hire the absolute best person that we can for the job that's in front of us.
Ms. Murphy?
Just real quickly, I worked as Speaker of the House. We were the first state in the nation to pass the Lilly Ledbetter Act when that law was passed, of all 50 states. But along with that, if I'm elected to Congress, I would sign on to the Paycheck Fairness Act. Because when we passed the Lilly Ledbetter Act, women were only receiving 73 cents for every dollar a man was earning. It's now only up to 77 cents. It's obvious that we need to do more. And if women are doing comparable pay or comparable work, they should get comparable pay.
All right, thank you very much. Remember, that response you're giving to the initial question is only 30 seconds, so I didn't mean to cut you off, but we have to adhere to that time limit. Let me continue with this question, and this will go to Mr. Blum. Given that there's a feeling that Americans are war-weary right now, but ISIS, the threat is escalating, obviously, in Syria and other areas. It's certainly possible that one of the first decisions that you might have to make when you arrive in Washington, D.C. is whether or not to increase or advance U.S. military action in this involvement, boots on the ground, so to speak. So where do you stand on that, Mr. Blum, and what would it take for you to say, we're going back in there on the ground?
Yes, ISIS was formed in the vacuum that was left when President Obama decided to pull our remaining 20,000 troops out of Iraq. They were mainly at that point in time just keeping the peace. I think that was the wrong decision, and I do not think he should have did it. I think we pulled our troops out way too soon. We've spent about $5 trillion in Iraq, in Afghanistan, the war on terror in the Middle East, and we've had over 50,000 killed and wounded of our nation's finest. And to pull out too soon and to negate everything that we spent in terms of our treasure and of lives over there, to me, is a mistake. Secondly, President Obama has been a huge supporter of the Arab Spring. And I think looking in the rearview mirror, the Arab Spring has destabilized the entire Middle East. So now we have ISIS, 40,000 troops strong, $3 million a day in funding. We need to be very careful in the Middle East on who we arm, because today's ally is tomorrow's enemy. And when we're arming someone,
Got to cut you off again, sorry. Mr. Murphy, your
Just
response.
real quickly, we don't have a lot of knowledge on that, but I think the most important thing we have to do is remember what got us there in the first place. They talked about weapons of mass destruction and that the Al-Qaeda operated out of Iraq. We found out that both of those weren't true. So I think the most important thing is to make sure we have the appropriate information before we act. And if we don't have the information, we should be slow to proceed. Because when we did this, we have affected not just the country of Iraq or Syria. And the problem we have is, regardless of who's in control, none of them are good options. We need to find what the proper solution is.
Equal management, time management cutoff.
Yes.
First. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, Amanda, you have the next question, and it goes to Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Murphy, you have said that the U.S. government should provide illegal immigrants with amnesty and all sorts of government perks, so to speak. Otherwise, they will join terrorist groups like ISIS. And you are being criticized from people on the other side of the aisle for believing in a policy of appeasement. What is your response to?
Listen, first of all, I believe that we need to deal with the issue of undocumented workers. That's why I support the Senate proposal where, one, they increased border security by 20,000 border guards, but secondly, it required undocumented workers to get in line. So I think those are the two things that we need to do, but we need to go further. We have 13 million undocumented workers. We saw what happened in Postville, and that didn't work. We need to make sure that we address this in a lawful manner and make sure that they perform public service, whether it's military service or some form of community service, besides getting in line. But I think the last thing that we need to do is, with the children that are children refugees that are coming here to the United States, this country has always been a country about fair play. And these are children refugees that their parents are probably deceased or been murdered. I think the most important thing, since the world is watching, is to make sure that we provide food, clothing, and shelter for these child refugees, because they're probably going to become allowed into the United States because of their refugee status.
That's time. Okay, Mr. Blum.
Yes, Pat did say a few months ago that if we didn't grant amnesty to these children, that they would in fact become terrorists within a generation. And it's typical of career politicians to use scare tactics during the election campaign. And this is yet another scare tactic, just like when Pat says that I want to raise the retirement age. Yet another scare tactic. And we have nothing to fear, Pat, but fear itself. I think we need to secure the border. It starts there. The federal government has not followed through and secured the border, and we need to secure it.
All right, just on time. I want to continue this immigration just for a little bit longer here, though. So how will you feel when the president bypasses Congress, as is expected to do shortly after the election, and does grant this amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants right now? How is that going to make either of you feel? Mr. Murphy, first of all.
Well, listen, I think the way that we need to address this is the way that I just laid out. One, do the Senate bill. It's a compromise between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. Pass that bill in the House. But then also, instead of giving general amnesty, make sure that those folks that are undocumented workers get in line and self-report. The second part, or the third part to that, though, too, needs to be that they perform forms of community service, and possibly including military service, to this country, so that they show a commitment both to the communities they're in and to this country. So I think the better route is through legislative action and through the proposals I've already talked about.
All right, Mr. Blum.
Yes, the people I've talked to the last 20 months in eastern Iowa do not trust the federal government on this issue. In 1986, under Ronald Reagan, they were promised to secure the border. It did not happen. In 2006, under President Bush, we had a Secure the Border Act. That did not happen. So people want to see the border secured first before we do anything else. After that, we need to fix this broken immigration system. 40% of the people here illegally are on overextended work visas.
All right, thank you very much. Next question, Christina Krippus of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, with the question to Mr. Blum.
Thank you. Mr. Blum, I'm going to stick with healthcare for a second here. I believe you once wrote about your opposition to the prescription drug benefit plan passed under President Bush. And I just wondered if you still are opposed to that plan, and now that it's been implemented for about the past decade, and If so, are there other parts of Medicare you'd like to see changes to?
It's yet another government takeover. It's yet another government program. And now we have a proposed takeover the entire healthcare system. Once the camel gets its nose under the tent, pretty soon the entire camel is going to be in the tent. That's why I was opposed to that 10 years ago. We have the finest healthcare in the world, and most Eastern Iowans agree with that. The problem is the costs have been rising so quickly that the average family, the average working family, cannot afford the premiums anymore. So we want to keep the quality high, but moderate the cost. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, the Democrat Party and Mr. Murphy say the way to do that is through government. The federal government is going to bring the costs down. Now, when I say that in the campaign trail, not only do people disagree with that, they think that's a laugh. It's a laugh line. The room usually busts out in laughter. Federal government has never decreased the cost of anything. We need the federal government to be the financier of health care for some individuals, and we need to let the miracle of the free market system work on the quality of health care, which is the finest in the world. We don't want to ruin that.
Mr. Blum, thank you very much. Mr. Murphy.
Christina, that's a good question. My opponent, he ended up talking about this and saying that it was a terrible compromise. But quite frankly, we had a huge issue with prescription drugs that we needed to address in this country, and it needs to be part of the health care reform that was done through the Affordable Care Act. And it got rid of the donut hole. And if we do some of the proposals he's talking about, prescription drugs may become another problem for seniors in this country. So I think more importantly, it's about making sure that we address the needs that Americans need, whether it's under Medicare, Medicaid, or the Affordable Care Act, and try to make those programs work better.
All right, we're going to cut you off there because I want to continue this on Medicare just a little bit, just to talk about Iowa. Reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid has been among the lowest in the entire country. So what can you do to help Iowa hospitals and physicians in their role in this, because Iowa has been at the lower end of the Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement? Mr. Blum first.
Yes, and this has been a problem since I can remember, so 20 to 25 years. It seems to me in talking to we've talked to physicians, CEOs of hospitals, CEOs of medical groups, nurses, everyone involved in this extremely complicated sector of our economy called healthcare. And they all agree that Iowa is basically penalized because we have better outcomes here with our patients than compared to the national average. And we also do it for a lesser amount of money. Those are good things, not bad things. I think we should be rewarded, but only in the government will we be penalized for that. That's why we need Iowa common sense in Washington, D.C.
Mr. Murphy.
Well, that's why I think we need to make sure that when we send somebody to Washington, they make sure that they look at a change to this, because there are states that receive a lot more reimbursement. My wife's a nurse. I've had several people in the healthcare industry talk to me about this issue, and it is a huge issue because the disparity is huge. That's the reason wages are lower here in Iowa for nurses than they are in almost every other state in the nation. We need to make sure that when we address healthcare reform, whether it's the Affordable Care Act or not, we are looking at addressing Medicare reform as well.
All right, Mr. Murphy, thank you very much. Just one question quick on this one, to continue healthcare just for a moment. And let me see if I can find the question I was going to talk about. As far as ACA, it has increased healthcare enrollment for 8 million Americans or so who did not have insurance before, so and obviously it's not going to be repealed. But Mr. Murphy, what's the first thing you would want to do to help make this a better plan, ACA overall, despite the criticism and the fact that many people are paying much higher deductibles and much higher premiums?
Well, there's actually, Ron, there's several things that you have to address. I think the first thing is you have to stop taxing people on their health insurance plans. If they have a good health insurance plan, they shouldn't be taxed for it. But along with that, I think we need to focus on some other things too. States that haven't opted into the Affordable Care Plan, we need to see what incentives need to be created. States like Iowa and Illinois have opted into the Medicaid expansion. We have the Healthy and Well program here in Iowa. States like Wisconsin, though, haven't. And you do have people that are coming to Iowa that are on Medicaid, especially in border communities, that may not have that. So we need to make sure that we create incentives for states like Wisconsin to opt in. Plus, we need to see, we got to fix the website so that it works better, it's more efficient, that it's easier to handle, and people to access it. But along with that, the other part we need to do is create incentives for insurance companies to get into the exchange. We don't have Wellmark here in Iowa doing it. We should try to get them in it.
Mr. Blum, what can we do to fix that?
Well, it's interesting. One of the original concepts and reasons for Obamacare was 30 million Americans were not insured. Well, the report says 10 years from now, 30 million Americans still are not going to be insured. Obamacare is going to cover an additional 13 million people that were uninsured. at a cost to the taxpayers of $1.4 trillion, that's with the T, trillion dollars. That's over $110,000 for every additional insured person under Obamacare.
All right, thank you very much. Alicia Yeager of the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald with the next question for Mr. Murphy.
Yes, Mr. Murphy, in your time as House Speaker in the Iowa legislature, you championed a number of priorities for the Democratic Party. How can Iowa voters be assured you'll reach across party lines if elected to Congress?
Actually, Alicia, it's a good question. I've had a long history of reaching across party lines. I worked on a 1-cent sales tax with the former Republican Speaker of the House, Christopher Rance, that has now been adopted statewide. We now have all school districts addressing school infrastructure issues. Along with that, I worked on the Hawkeye plan, the Healthy and Well Kids of Iowa plan that insured 63,000 children. While I was in the minority, I worked with Republicans to get a bill passed that we could help insure children and create a trust fund to work on that as well. I've worked on a pharmaceutical cooperative bill and a pharmaceutical repository bill for very expensive drugs. But I think the best one I can talk about tonight as Speaker of the House, we worked with Republicans when we had massive flooding here in 2008. We were able to address issues that were not being addressed by FEMA or by the Small Business Administration so that we could get people back to work and help rebuild communities like Cedar Rapids so that they would have the things they need and not wait for the answers from the federal government.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Blum.
Pat and I stood in the same stage a couple months ago at the Community Bankers Association in Des Moines, and in his speech he said, I'm often accused of being the most partisan member of the Iowa legislature. And he said, oftentimes that is true. So that came out of his mouth, not mine, and I'll never forget the images during a debate on taxes in Des Moines. He had the state troopers come in and throw the taxpayers that were voicing their displeasure out of the Iowa House chambers.
Mr. Blum, I'll continue this just momentarily. You're not a politician, and you're very proud of that. So how will you be able to work in Congress as a freshman congressman from Iowa and work across the aisle to help Iowans back here in our state?
Yes, I am proud not to be a politician, and once again, I don't want a career in politics. I'm a businessman. I'm a pragmatic businessman. I'm a problem solver. I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. Well, my number one issue is jobs in the economy and raising the incomes of all Iowans. If someone across the aisle, Nancy Pelosi, she's pretty liberal, she has a good idea on how to help this economy, I'm on board with it. I have never been one to believe the Republican Party has a corner on great ideas. Democrats have some good ideas as well. So I am more than willing to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats if it's going to make this economy stronger and lift more people's incomes up. I have absolutely no problem with that. There's no telling how far we can go as a country if we're not worried about who gets the credit.
So, Mr. Murphy, is being a politician, as long as you have, is that an advantage to you going to Washington, do you think? Or?
Well, there's no question I have experience from the 25 years I've been in the legislature. And I'll tell you right now, there are things that Republicans strongly believe in, and there's things that Democrats strongly believe in, and you're not going to change those positions, but it's all the other things in the middle, like making sure that you address a community like Cedar Rapids when it's devastated by a huge record-setting flood. It's making sure that you do the things that are best for schools, addressing medical issues for seniors, whether it's prescription drugs, or if it's focusing on a drug repository or the Hawkeye bill.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're going to take a real short break here. I do need to take one right now. We'll come back more with our congressional debate in just a moment.
Ron.
All right, welcome back to our 1st District Congressional Debate here tonight on KWWL and on KWWL.com. Now, earlier this week, we asked some of our viewers to send in questions that they had for our 1st District candidates tonight. The first one we'd like to ask comes from Kathy Cahoon. She's asking about Social Security. Kathy asks, what is your plan to make sure that Social Security will be there for the future generations? And Mr. Blum, I believe you're up first for the first response.
Yes, it's a great question, and every time someone in the Republican Party suggests any kind of a change or solution, it's demagogued by their opponents. And we've seen that, and I'm sure we're going to see $600,000 of attack ads in the next 2 weeks about how I want to raise the retirement age. I think this is an important issue. My mother was on Social Security for over 20 years. So for me, it's not just good policy for the country, it's personal. But here's a fact. If we do nothing, Social Security is going to go bankrupt by 2033. Lots of ideas have been thrown out, such as raising the retirement age, removing the income cap on earnings, means testing the benefits or letting young people put some of their money in their own private accounts. I think it's an important enough issue. It needs a bipartisan discussion and a bipartisan solution, which might include one or all of those potential solutions.
Mr. Blum, thank you very much. Mr. Murphy, Social Security.
Well, I'll just tell you right now, I've been endorsed by the National Association to Protect Medicare and Social Security. I just received that endorsement this week. And the reason why is Social Security is solvent for the next 18 years. It covers the next generation. The goal is not to adjust the next generation. It's for my children and my grandchildren. So the goal needs to be to raise the cap on the $117,000.
So 60 million Americans right now are on Social Security, are receiving some kind of benefits, but only, let's see, how many million, 160 million are putting in. That is a problem, you would have to admit, right, Mr. Murphy? And what are you going to do about it? I mean, how can you?
This is a good example, Ron. There's 117.
Privatized? Or?
Right now, it's capped. It's capped at $117,000 of earned income, and it's important for your viewers to know this at home. So anybody that earns over that, so if you earn $1 or $2 million a year as an executive, you stop paying taxes into the Social Security fund in January. Shouldn't those folks be paying in since they're doing well enough in our society to help make this more solvent for the generations to come? If you move the cap up to to 150,000, that would make it solvent for the next 30 or 40 years on top of that. And if we lifted it completely, it would probably be solvent for the next 75 to 100 years. And that's what we should be looking at, because they have raised that periodically. It was at 88,000 back about 20 years ago, and they have periodically lifted it. We should look at raising that cap again, especially with people that are doing well right now.
All right, Mr. Blum.
Oh, yes, something that's never mentioned enough is if we have more taxpayers, we would have less pressure on the Social Security and Medicare system. Once again, had we had a Reagan type of recovery instead of a Barack Obama recovery, we'd have another 11 million workers right now, another 11 million people employed. We'd be at full employment. They'd be paying taxes. Secondly, if career politicians hadn't raided and spent the trust fund for Social Security, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, Ron.
Okay, Amanda, I think you have the next question, and it goes to Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Murphy, let's go back. I want to talk about something President Obama said today. We want to talk about Ebola again, since this is the hot topic in our country. The president said today he's not going to give in to some demands from lawmakers for a ban on travelers from the worst hit countries. How do you stand with the president on this?
Well, first of all, I don't know if the president should be making that decision. Our healthcare professionals should at the Centers for Disease Control. They're the ones that have the knowledge. They understand how dangerous the disease is, how easy it is to spread. I think they're the ones that should be making the decision. Right now, we have military troops over there also advising people in Western Africa. We need to make sure that we do this in a very educational approach. But I think we've got to stop the fear-mongering. We have people that are talking about this being airborne. It isn't airborne. It's a disease that you have to have direct contact with bodily fluid. And so I think the big part is making sure that we listen to the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health. And this is the other reason it's an important. National Institutes of Health reported this week that if they would have had the funding they needed over the last several years, they probably would have some type of vaccine for that drug. We need to make sure that we give them the tools they need to be successful in controlling and combating this disease.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blum.
I absolutely think we should have a travel ban. It oftentimes seems to me that President Obama acts as if he's president of the world. And I'd like to remind him that he's president of the United States of America, and his job as such is to protect Americans first. There should have been a travel ban absolutely in place, and that disease should not have been brought to this country.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Christina Krippus of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, you are up for the next question. And it goes to Mr. Blum.
Thank you. Mr. Blum, farming is, of course, important to our state, and one of the concerns you'll hear from the agriculture industry over and over again is about the regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency. How would you balance the need for clean air and clean water with the needs of farmers to be able to produce the goods that we eat day to day?
Yeah, first of all, my candidacy has been endorsed by the Iowa Farm Bureau, and I'm very, very proud of that. And unlike Bruce Braley, I'm very proud to stand on the same stage with an Iowa farmer any day of the week. The EPA is a huge concern of farmers. The Waters of the USA Act, where basically the federal EPA, based on where water runs, says that they can control your entire property, your entire farm. As a real estate developer, I've actually had bad experiences with the EPA to the extent that I've nicknamed them the Employment Prevention Agency. Now, most farmers would agree that if that agency was not hyperactive and out of control and issuing a record number of regulations, they could deal with it. We all want clean air, we all want clean water, particularly farmers do, because that's how they make their livelihood. But the EPA needs to stay within the right-of-way lines, so to speak.
Mr. Blum, thank you very much. Mr. Murphy.
Well, I've been endorsed by the Iowa Corn Growers Association because of my work in the legislature. We've got 85,000 jobs that are directly related to the whole renewable fuel industry. So we need to continue our focus because as goes agriculture, so goes the state of Iowa. 85,000 people employed currently, but if you take a look at the 1st district, you look at Quaker Oats, you look at John Deere and the meatpacking plants that we have in this district, it is very important that we protect our environment, and we need to continue to work with the EPA like they like DNR has worked with Iowa.
But I'll let you continue this a little bit because I
Okay.
wanted to ask the question about the farm bill. It's been passed already, so it's too late now. But what about separating out the farm legislation from the nutrition part of that? How do you feel about that? Why is that even in there?
Okay, and I think this is the big part because when you talk about agriculture, that is still the single most important industry here in Iowa. So as goes agriculture, so goes the state of Iowa. And we need to make sure that we work with the Department of Natural Resources and have them do like they do here in Iowa, where they work in a cooperative way to make sure that things get done through cooperation through farmers. I think on the issue of what you're talking about, though, too, especially in this area, we need to continue to make sure that we grow the economy, looking at wind, solar, diesel, soy diesel. Those are some of the areas that we need to continue to focus on in the agricultural arena. And we need to make sure that we grow our economy by having value-added agriculture. So there's a number of things we can be doing to help grow the economy here in the state. And quite frankly, we need to continue that.
Okay, Mr. Blum, thank you.
Yes, I agree. We won't be debating this for another 4 years, Ron, but
Yeah.
I think the food stamps or the nutrition part of the Farm Bill should be separated, and I think each one should be debated in an open and transparent way on the floor of Congress. I also agree with our own Senator Grassley in the Farm Bill. I know he was against this portion of it, that something like 80% of the benefits, the farm benefits, go to 20% of the farmers. And so I think there should be an income requirement based on the payments that you receive from the federal government, because they do not need our tax dollars.
All right, thank you very much. Next question, Alicia Yeager of the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald to Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. College financial planning website advisors.com estimates the average college graduate this year will have to pay back about $33,000 in student loans, the most indebted class ever. What role, if any, does the federal government play in making college more affordable?
Well, I think this is a huge issue, and I think this is a big difference between the two of us. On the last question, I would not agree. I would keep the food stamps and the subsidy together. But with this, I think the part that's interesting is he would like to get rid of the Department of Education, which would eliminate Pell Grants completely. But more importantly, it's about making sure that the Pell Grants stay so the children who qualify, that come from low-income families, can get that access to higher education. But along with that, we need to support Elizabeth Warren's bill as well, so that young people who need to get an education and need to go through financial industries to get loans, that they get them at a rate that's not charging exorbitant interest rates. So I would support the Elizabeth Warren bill because I think it does help students, it helps reduce that burden, but the other part too is we need to make sure that the Pell Grant's there as well for students that qualify.
Mr. Blum.
I'm not in favor of eliminating the Department of Debt, and in fact, I'm in favor of increasing the Pell Grants, Pat. I think if we add in the number of students who graduate from college with no debt, and look at that statistics, the average debt's about $20,000, and I think $20,000 should be relative to the money that someone's earning when they graduate from college. And the problem is today's economy, once again, is not good, and we have a record number of college students working in areas that they did not go to school for.
All right, thank you very much. Another real quick social media question from our pages. Do we have that ready to go? Yeah, this one comes from Facebook. And the Judd Mercurio, hope I'm pronouncing that right for your name there, Judd, he asks, should the Farm Bill, oh, I'm sorry, we did that already. So the food stamp programs, we'll bypass that. You guys are off the hook on that. How about that? Okay. All right, so the next question goes to Mr. Blum, and I'd like to ask this one. Just going back to jobs, you've said that this is really your top priority, but you would be a freshman congressman in Washington, D.C. among 435 members of the House. How do you create jobs as someone from Iowa?
First of all, I'm all about leadership, and I've led my entire life, Ron. And when I go to the United States Congress, they may say, you know, get in the back of the room and mind your own business and be quiet, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to the Congress to lead. Yes, the economy and jobs is my #1 issue because this is the worst recovery in in United States history post-World War II. We need to reform the business taxes. We need to cut corporate welfare. We need to end crony capitalism. If we start looking at the budget and where to make cuts at in the budget, I say let's start with those monies that are going to the advantaged, not the disadvantaged. And by that I mean large corporations and very wealthy individuals that do not need our tax dollars. For example, General Electric Corporation made $14 billion in income 3 years ago and paid 0 in income taxes in this country. And I don't think that seems fair to most Eastern Iowans. We need to reduce regulations, reduce uncertainty, cut down the debt and deficit, balance a budget, and also we need tort or lawsuit abuse reform.
All right, thank you. Mr. Murphy.
Well, I think as a legislator, I understand that, quite frankly, you're not going to go in and change the world, but the most important part is figuring out those things that you can work on to both improve your country as well as improve your district or your state. And as a legislator, I've always went in with the idea of what makes a better Iowa, and along with that, what makes a better community for Dubuque. And if I go to Congress, I'm going to focus on what things I can do, like the WRDA bill for Cedar Rapids, making sure that we get funding for that, focusing on those things that will improve the first district, whether it's agriculture related or if
That's
it's something
time.
to do with higher ed.
All right, thank you very much. We don't do this very often, but tonight we'd ask the candidates to ask a question of each other, and via our coin flip earlier, the toss. Mr. Blum, you get to ask Mr. Murphy a question. Do it right now. I want to hear what you have to say to him.
Pat, at the polls, the first poll was taken about 10 weeks ago, and you were 11 points ahead. Another poll was taken 8 weeks ago, and that lead was cut to 4.5 points. 6 weeks ago, there was another poll taken, and you had a 1.5 point lead. 3 weeks ago, a poll was taken, and I'm now in the lead. What does that say to you?
I'll just tell the folks back home, polls are a snapshot in time. What people think today may not be the same thing that they will be deciding on November 4th. So I really believe that polls are just a snapshot in time, and you take advantage of what the poll educates you for a given point in time. I don't think it says anything. I'm more focused on the people that have yet to vote.
Mr. Murphy, you have a chance to ask a question now of Mr.
Okay.
Blum.
Rod, I'll just have a simple question. You talk in your mailings and talking here tonight, you talk about preserving Medicare and Social Security. I guess my question is with Social Security, do you call preserving Social Security the raising the retirement age and reducing benefits?
Good question. As I've consistently said, first of all, Social Security is an important enough issue, Pat. It needs to be bipartisan, the solution. And there's been lots of ideas bandied about and thrown out, and I think that some of those are raising the retirement age, some is removing the income cap, some is means testing the benefits. You know, I think a solution may be a little bit of all of those, but I think it needs to be debated. And what we come to needs to be bipartisan. It can't be all Republicans' way, or it can't be all Democrats' way, because it's that important of a social program. So it needs to be debated, and there's lots of potential solutions to the problem. But we do need to do something. Doing nothing is not an option.
Good. All right, thank you. Mr. Blum, do you have another question for him, or do you want us to go on?
I already asked.
Do you have another question for him?
No.
Okay, well, darn. Okay.
Not unless we're going to discuss what happened to Iowa today.
One of the most talked about attack ads in this campaign, Mr. Murphy, this is directed to you, does show you screaming on the floor of the Iowa House. And this ad labels you as an angry career politician. I believe the word was actually corrupt in there, too. So I would like to ask you, you told Jerry Gallagher of our staff that you didn't care what people thought about this. So, well, please describe kind of overall what was happening there. Remember, you have to do this in a minute.
I have no problem.
And
yeah,
are you an
first of
angry
all,
career corrupt politician?
No, that's for the voters to decide. I'll tell you right now, I have spent 25 years fighting for the middle class, and when Republicans closed the switchboard on the day that we were voting on a very contentious collective bargaining bill, they closed down the switchboard, and from people I talked to, it's the first time that it occurred at least in 40 years, and they've had the switchboard about 50 years. So they actually shut down the ability for people to call and complain. I was outraged. I got on the floor, and I called the leadership of the Republicans as well. On the issue of corruption, the part that they're talking about is the whole issue with Findlay Hospital. And I will just tell you right now, there's a social responsibility for hospitals to be safe places for people to get care. If they don't meet those, should they receive government funds? And the only thing we did was we took away the ability for them to get a Medicaid increase, but we did fix it within 48 hours. But for some reason, that's been taken and distorted out of fact. And the bottom line is, we did work out an agreement with them, and we worked out on the switchboard thing. I'm still upset that was closed.
Mr. Blum, response?
Well, angry, I'll let the video speak for itself. That was Pat in action, so I'll let that speak for itself. Career politician. Pat is a career politician. He's been doing this for the last 25 years. And the corrupt part, he singled out Findlay Hospital in Dubuque because, well, there's a unionization effort going on at Findlay at the time, not going very well, and he singled them out to freeze or reduce their Medicaid reimbursement rates. The only hospital in the state of Iowa that was singled out. So once again, I agree with them. I think the voters will decide that.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Christina Cripps of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. Christina, you have the next question.
All right, thank you. The administration proposed a scaled-back implementation of the renewable fuel standard last year, and it hasn't acted since. How would you, as a freshman congressman, work to ensure that the RFS remains a piece of the puzzle in gaining independence from foreign oil?
Whose question is that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It would be Mr. Murphy.
Okay, first of all, I do not agree with the President Obama's administration on the renewable fuel standard. I think we need to keep it. It's been good for the state. It's been good for the economy. When you take a look, as I mentioned earlier, 85,000 jobs in this state are directly tied to the renewable fuel industry, whether it's the biorefinery in Esterville, wind, solar. So there's a number of things that are tied to this. So quite frankly, we should keep the renewable fuel standard, and we shouldn't get rid of it. And so as a member of Congress, I would make sure that I would fight to keep this in line, make sure that we keep it so that we help continue to grow our economy here in Iowa, which we've done with this renewable fuel standard.
Mr. Blum.
This is something we agree on. I think the renewable fuel standard is extremely important to Iowans and Eastern Iowans, farmers, and our agricultural business sector. It's clean, it's renewable, and I'm a person that believes in competition. And big oil has had a stranglehold on the fuel market in my entire life. I don't think they were going to allow the ethanol industry to come into this market and compete with them. So I think this was an example that not only does it help Iowa, but it also gets some competition at the gas pump, which we can sorely need because gas has doubled in price
Got to get you
in the last 6 years.
Alicia, you have the next question. Go ahead. And this would be for Mr. Blum.
Mr. Blum, you ran for this office in 2012, but did not make it past the Republican primary. What's changed since that time to make you a better candidate for this position now?
Oh, that's a good question. I get asked that sometimes. When I ran the first time, the last election cycle in 2012 against Ben Lang, I didn't know what I didn't know. I was a career small businessman, and I love the country, and I threw my hat in the ring. Most of that campaign was myself, my wife Karen, and our daughter Sophie at the kitchen table, printing out direct mail pieces, licking envelopes, licking stamps. We did basically everything ourselves. Karen drove me all over this entire district. So the bottom line was I didn't spend enough time on getting a professional staff involved. I didn't spend enough time on raising money. And even in spite of all of that, we came very close to knocking off Ben Lang, who was the Republican nominee the year before. And that built, we did do a great job with grassroots. And the people loved our message. And that was the reason we almost won that primary. And we've built on that grassroots support in this campaign. And plus, I've added to that now professional staff. So I think we believe that's a winning formula.
Mr. Murphy, is he ready this time?
Yeah, but how do I respond to him running for office?
I'll rephrase it this way. Has he changed from what you've seen in the last 2 years to make him more worthy?
Republicans. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, has he changed enough to make him more worthy to win this congressional race than 2 years ago when he lost in the primary to Ben Lang? Or what makes you even better than him?
Well, I'm glad you phrased it that way. You know, quite frankly, I'm glad. I'll just tell you right now, I have 25 years of experience working with Republicans, working to move this state forward, helping to grow the economy, to grow the ag industry through what I've talked about earlier, through renewable fuels. But along with that, it's also making sure we take care of the middle class, like increasing the minimum wage, making sure we do paycheck fairness for women through the Lilly Ledbetter Act. Those are just a few of the examples I've done, and if I go to Congress, I'll do the same.
All right. Unfortunately, boy, this hour has passed far too quickly, so it is now time for our closing statements here tonight. Since Mr. Blum, you went second in making your opening statement, you'll go first with your closing statement. Mr. Blum, you have 2 minutes.
My favorite definition of insanity is Albert Einstein's definition of insanity, and that is if we keep doing tomorrow the same things we did today and expecting different results is patently insane. And what that means, what I mean by that is if we keep sending career politicians to Washington, D.C. and expecting different results, that's insane. If we send career politicians to Washington, they're going to continue to build the $18 trillion debt. They're going to continue to print $65 billion a month. They're going to continue to rack up $500 to $700 billion a year in deficits. They're going to continue to have a failed foreign policy, and they're in it for themselves. I think what we need to do is send people to Washington, D.C. who are not interested in a career. If you think America can do better, if you think we can balance our budget in the next 4 years, if you think we can reduce the debt and the burden of debt that we put on our children and grandchildren, if you think we can have a coherent foreign policy, if you think our education system can be so much better, if you believe that our healthcare system, when we combine the government roles with the miracle of the free market, can be better. Overall, if you believe this country, America, can do better, I'm your man. If you think this country is heading in the right direction and you want government to control every aspect of your life, you should vote for my opponent. Thank you so much for listening tonight, and I respectfully, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, respectfully ask for your vote November 4th. God bless you, God bless Iowans, and God bless this amazing country we live in.
All right, Mr. Rod Blum, thank you very much. Mr. Pat Murphy, your closing statement here tonight.
Again, I would like to thank KWWL and the viewers at home for tuning in, and this is democracy at its best. I hope I can get your vote on Tuesday, November 4th. I'll just tell you right now, I've spent 25 years fighting for middle-class families. As I mentioned earlier, my wife Terry and I have been able to live in Dubuque and in Northeast Iowa our entire life, and now all 4 of our children live here as well. I want to make sure that they have the same economic opportunities and that their children, which are my grandchildren, have that same opportunity too. That's making sure we have a strong education system. That's making sure that we raise the minimum wage for those people at the low end of the pay scale so that they get a raise too. But along with that, we also need to make sure that we have a strong education system so that they can get the education they need so they can fill the high-tech jobs, the advanced manufacturing jobs that we have in this state and across this country, so that we can keep our young people in the area if they choose to. But along with that, we need to have a member that goes to Congress with a good, strong record. I will work to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. I'll support the Paycheck Fairness Act so that we make sure women receive the same pay as men in the workplace. But along with that, though, too, we need to preserve our social safety net, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. I'll just tell you right now, my opponent tonight has mentioned it again, talking about means testing, putting everything on the table, raising the retirement age. Social Security is solvent for at least the next generation. It doesn't need to be fixed today or in the next 2 years, but we need to work towards a long-term solution so that it's there for my children and my grandchildren. If we listen to him, we'll do risky investments like putting it on Wall Street. He will say he does not have a record, but he has a long record of writing in the Telegraph-Herald. He has talked about the fact that the RFS standard creates winners and losers. Along with that, he's talked about eliminating the Department of Ed and voucherizing Medicare. I'm Pat Murphy. I'd appreciate your vote on Tuesday, November 4th.
Within time, too. How about that? Thanks very much. Mr. Murphy, thank you. Mr. Blum, thank you for being here tonight with us to help our voters make a more informed decision on Election Day on November 4th. I want to thank everybody who is watching home tonight here on Main Channel, KWWL, also on KWWL.com, on our Facebook page, our tweets. Thanks to our KWWL anchor, reporter, and Amanda Goodman here tonight, Christinia Krippus from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, and also Alicia Yeager of the Telegraph-Herald, the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald, our coverage partners there in the Tri-State. So remember, to all you watching here tonight, early voting is already underway. You can vote absentee ballot, or you can vote in person, as I prefer to do, on November 4th. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here tonight. Have a great race. It's been an expensive, kind of a grinded out, couple of grinders here doing a great job. So we appreciate it. We wish you both the very best. Thank you for watching, and good night, everyone. Thank you.